Hello, guys, and welcome back to Time Under Tension. If you've been with us in the past couple months, we've been working through a series on mind, body, spirit, and we have officially concluded that and are going to be moving forward into a new series starting next week. But this week, we thought we'd do something fun and a little bit more probably socially relevant and talk about a movie that we just saw. And that movie is a very philosophical film about the meaning of life, and it's called Barbie.
It
So
actually is extremely philosophical in its nature, though, just super low key.
it is. So what were your expectations going into the movie, and maybe what was your experience? How did your experience contrast to that?
I think I went in a little closed-minded, to be honest. I'm just not a big surface level individual, and I think I had a little bit of an expectation of like, what is this gonna be really about, and how am I going to like create buy-in when we're talking about Barbie and Ken? Um, and my expectations were massively superseded. And I think the biggest thing for me was how deep the mission of the movie, from my perspective, really was, the impact it had on me, and how they were able to keep it a little bit lighter. So I appreciated that a lot about the movie, that there were a lot of very, very, very relevant underlying topics of our world today. And it was explained and worked through in a very simple way that was able to really bring so much light to men, women, this idea of living in a perfect world versus reality, the choices we hold, and how to be an agent of change would be how I would describe my experience.
So, just as a spoiler alert, we're going to talk a little bit about the plot of Barbie throughout this. So, if you haven't seen it and would prefer to see it first, definitely do so. Or if you want to go into it with some things to look for throughout the movie, listen to this first, go see it, report back what you learn. But as you can imagine, and if you've seen the previews for this movie, it looks pretty cheesy. And just the concept in general, I was very hesitant to go. But I went into it and I'm very interested in film and storytelling and just the dynamics of everything Hollywood. So I try to go in with an open mind and just look at it as art. And when I did that with this movie, I was really surprised and was able to move through being closed minded into just very feeling a lot of respect for how they worked a lot of deeper meaning into the story, like you said. There was a lot of social commentary on things like feminism and the patriarchy, but one thing we've talked a lot about since then has been Barbie's like existential crisis as she starts to think about death and what it would mean for her life to end. So how did
Yeah.
that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I want to hear your how it resonated with you as well, so you can go ahead and respond to that after I share mine. But I think that was the perfect way to frame it. Like seeing it as art and going in with an open mind, that was the true way of actually being open to receive the depth of the movie. So I think that I just wanted to point that out. I think that's the change I needed to make, was my openness as a person to receiving all that God could bring me through this. And it ended up being extremely significant in my own personal journey. So um I was super grateful for that. And I guess that's where what I can speak on really is, I don't really remember your exact question, to be totally transparent, but the impact of the movie itself brought Ecclesiastes to life for me in this pursuit of pleasure aspect of what they talk about in Ecclesiastes, and then also just the true meaning of life and what that can bring. The choice that Barbie made to, maybe I shouldn't say that. Um, the choice between living in a perfect world forever and having the ability to create impact, be an agent of change in a world that needs changing, having the capacity to create inspiration, not be the afterthought of someone else's inspiration or imagination. All of that was really incredible to think about being the temple for. Like, I
Mhm.
have the capacity to have an imagination and to go create and to bring my thoughts alive in a way that could massively impact the world as a whole. So I think that's how it resonated most with me, and realizing that that choice to understand that you're going to have emotions that are super painful. You're going to be really sad. You're going to feel, you know, moments of depression or despair and suffering, but that choosing that means you get to choose the joy, and you get to choose the pursuit of like feeling so empowered by creating change, or having the aspect of going into this imaginary place and being able to bring that idea that's unseen to the scene, and really impact and lead through that. So, um, letting go of this idea that I'm working towards a place of no problems, and not holding that as my definition for finally being good in God's eyes. Um, it's letting go of the fact that pleasure is something to enjoy in its present moment experience, like when you're having a pleasurable, you know, moment, or you're choosing a behavior that is going to give you a moment of joy, or like a vacation of some kind, but it's not this like desired place to live, or this place that, to like want to exist in, because you really just don't have any sort of fulfilling experience, because you just don't know like the suffering aspect of things. So just being able to let go of seeing this life of pleasure, this like life of no problems, as what I'm working towards. It just helped me change that in a really incredible way.
That's so great. For some context, in the movie, you're in what, Barbie Land?
Brilliant.
Barbie Land, right? And everything's perfect and it's the best day every single day, you know? And then Barbie wakes up one day and starts to think about death and starts to have emotions and has flat feet. And she goes to this like wise, weird Barbie who tells her the reason that you're experiencing this is because your human who's playing with you is struggling right now. And they're creating a narrative, a storyline that's impacting the way that you're experiencing the world. And then she has a Neo moment, and red pill, blue pill has to decide if she's going to stay in her fantasy land and live in pleasure, or go into the real world and find her human and resolve it, you know, maybe address what's going on and help her human. And she has to go into the real world. And when she does, she experiences this flip flop of everything that she had experienced in Barbie Land, which is, it's no longer matriarchy. It's very much a patriarchy in the real world, and people are unkind, and it's nothing like what she had experienced. But she starts to understand the contrast, like you're saying, where she can have those moments of pleasure, but they are made more real by the pain that she experiences. And she even describes like crying and how it hurts and it aches, but it also feels good. And you start to realize that emotions are complex and they're so satisfying, even when they're not always, you know, good and peaceful and maybe positive things that we normally say. it creates a contrast, and it creates a more of a depth of life that you just don't experience without having both ends of the experience. For me, it definitely tied to Ecclesiastes. We've been doing a devotional in Ecclesiastes for several weeks now, and the premise is basically everything in this life is fleeting, and we need to focus on like the quality of our lives over like the actual tangible things so much. And it's not just an endless pursuit of pleasure that's not going to be fulfilling, but it's also not an endless pursuit of work that's not going to be fulfilling. It's learning to ride the in between and to stay faithful throughout the seasons of life, whether that's a season of struggle and trial and suffering, or a season of plenty and abundance and growth and peace. And both of those things are going to fluctuate over time. And it's all about staying as steady and balanced as we can throughout the waves of life. So with Barbie, her going out into the real world and getting to experience those different seasons of life and the extremes of emotion, it created such a depth to her experience that it's hard to go back from that. And I think on a tangible level, when I think about people I've heard of who have achieved some huge goal, their dream goal, maybe even achieved it earlier than they would have thought, maybe sold their business for $1 billion and can retire to a beach at 25. And at some point they become restless because we're made to ride these ups and downs, these waves. And when we start to cling to just pleasure, we kind of starve our souls of the array of experiences that we need to just feel full.
So how is that impacting your life?
I think it's giving me an opportunity to find more peace and acceptance when my external circumstances aren't, quote, ideal. So this is on a really basic level. So I've recently been learning a lot about training and eating in accordance with my menstrual cycle. And last week I was in a phase of my cycle where my hormones were just rocking and I was feeling good and strong, and recovery was great and endurance was good and my mood was super stable and everything was just flying. I was like, I'm on a roll. I finally figured out the routine that works well for me. And then this week is my PMS week and it hit me like a wall. And I just like, man, I don't feel as energized and my digestion's really slow and I'm holding water and mentally I just feel a little bit more down. And usually I would not pay attention to the cycle as much and just think, oh, I'm not working hard enough, I'm getting lazy. I would put myself down for having a low week. And now I'm learning this is part of my seasons. This is part of the experience of riding those waves of highs and lows and doing the best you can with the resources that you have, which is what I tell my clients all the time. Like, doing well is doing the best you can with the resources that you have today. The resources that you have today are not the same as you might have tomorrow or next week or you had yesterday. Like, you just need to gauge at the beginning of each day, where am I at? How am I feeling? What are my energy levels? All of those things, and then face the day and be faithful in the day. So stay committed, but not get so outcome focused that you miss the point. And the point is to grow in the day. So whether we're growing through a season of struggle or we're growing through a season of pleasure, like those things are both equally good, but it's all about our journey along the way and not clinging to the external experience.
Totally. I feel like you still divert from your own personal journey sometimes in these responses because you just want to teach the deep philosophical aspect of everything that you're learning through your personal journey. But I think that was perfect. I think that was perfect.
Well, that's fair though. Let me go into that more. So I use the menstrual cycle as an example because I think that's something I'm struggling with this week. I have a jiu-jitsu competition in 2 weeks, right? And I'm like, I got to be my best. And right now I don't feel my best. And I so easily start to get down. When I get down, I lose focus on what's important. I lose focus on what's God doing in my life right now. Like, maybe I should be thankful for the work that my body did last week and give it a week of rest and know it'll be back in a good spot hormonally. Like, it's starting to accept that the seasons are what I need, and trusting that God is giving me what I need in every moment, even if in that moment I'm like, this wasn't what I wanted, or I worked really hard. Why is this happening? Like, moving from a why is this happening to me to a why is this happening for me? And that word makes all the difference, because you start to recognize that every single thing that's happening in your life is happening for you, even if you don't understand it right now.
Totally. That. Love that. That was big. And I'm gonna kind of go on a mini tangent because I think this really just ties into something else we were talking about that also I think is perfect for this demographic that's usually listening to this podcast, is this idea of our bodies are essentially going through seasons as well. And the thought that came to my mind, and this is very much how my brain works. So this is not a scientific explanation by any means on my behalf. This is definitely more of a live um, Olivia response. But when I think about the 4 weeks essentially of our menstrual cycle, and this is where this came from, we have those weeks where like the fourth week essentially is when we have the actual menstrual flow, like the release, right?
First week.
And that first week, okay, got you. So then this week that you're feeling like super powerful is what week?
Like last week,
Right.
week 3 was last week.
Okay. And so
Yeah.
then the fourth week is the week that's like, I feel
Yeah.
like death.
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, this makes like total sense with the seasons of our earth. Like, think about spring, right? And then you have summer, then you have fall, and then you have winter. And you're literally, if you're talking about these weeks, it's like that fourth week in the winter, and this is where I'm going with our overall health in general. We may have seasons where our body needs something massively different. And a lot of the time, especially with what you're experiencing, I know this is kind of like theoretical in its nature right now, but there are seasons where our bodies get to a place where they don't need as much rest and they don't need as much food, and you can kind of cut down a little bit and your body's like very in sync with that and doesn't feel a lot of resistance. Then there are other seasons like winter, like that fourth week, where it's like a lot of the time you just feel slower, you feel more lethargic, you need a little bit more rest, things aren't going, moving as fast, and so your body's naturally in a state where maybe you need to grow a little bit. Like that's the space to grow because you're not doing as much. You're not being called to do as much. And this is this area where growth looks a little bit different, but you have to kind of maybe sustain a different body stature or a different sort of balance hormonally with nutrition and your training and all these things. So I just think there's so much more to understanding seasons that it shows up even in how we work through hormonally and how we are able to really show up. And even when you talk about training prior to your menstrual cycle, how you have to be like not training as much during this time because of what's happening in the body and preparing it and all these things. Like that makes so much sense in the seasons of life. And when I thought of that, and then I thought of Barbie, you see her kind of work through seasons of emotions that she's never experienced before. And I think it was just really helpful to grasp the concept of seasons as a life motto or as a maybe a philosophy of understanding life. And you can have summer, spring, fall, and winter all in a week, to be honest. Like it's not that seasons have to fall in the months and that's how you should live your life. But I do think there's a pattern to the universe. And I think that is directly connected to us as people because I believe so strongly that we are intra-connected with the universe, which is why saying language like things happen for me is so much bigger than just the viewpoint of the perspective that you're approaching the situation with. It's understanding your true oneness with the universe. So if you're understanding that we are love and we are energy and we are all connected to God all the time, that even the things from a circumstance point of view or an emotional point of view, or the things that have happened to us in the past, like our big T trauma, all of those things have a very deep, deep goodness to them that is going to eventually present itself in its fruit. But you have to be willing to open yourself to the truth of seasons of life that are gonna be super uncomfortable at times, and it's gonna require growth and forward movement all the time. Like, we're never stuck. Like,
Mhm.
we have to keep moving. The place where we get stuck or we is when we choose stagnancy and we choose to allow circumstances or emotions or big T trauma that is not who we truly are define us completely. So I think saying all of that, Barbie realizes who she is and also helps Ken realize who he is, separate of one another, which is important for Ken in one area, and I think just allows Barbie this opportunity to um, realize what holding a position of true independence feels like, which is a really cool dichotomy to see happening in the movie. That when they both realize who they are and who they want to be, they come into this place of peace and this like aha moment of like, oh, this is who I am, and like, great. And all that comes with that. I'm on board for that because knowing who I am and not being dependent on another person, or knowing who I am and truly understanding that I have a mind and I have amazing thoughts and imagination and the power to create change when I bring my team together with me, like when I unite with all of my, what we would say, friends or community or whatever you church, the power in that is incredible. And so I think all that kind of tied together for me with what you said and understanding ourselves a little bit better.
And I think a lot of it is about the story that you're telling yourself about what's happening, right? Like you're saying, you know, this is happening for me. There's one of my favorite books is The Alchemist, and one of the concepts and lines in that book is that the universe is conspiring in your favor. And ever since I read that, I tell myself that all the time. The universe is conspiring in my favor. And throughout the story, if you've never read it, I'd highly recommend it. It it's all about like everything that comes up, every obstacle. The main character knows that like he has this mission, this purpose that he's on, and so he just has to figure out what the next step is. Like something bad will happen and he's like has to just get to the next step. He's not like, well, that must have not been the true purpose for my life, or I hit this obstacle, I'm going to just view this as a wall in my way. I think when we start to look at every obstacle as having inherently an opportunity within it, and stop clinging again so heavily to the external thing and pay more attention to what's being presented to us, when we can learn not to cling so much to things in life. This is a very like Buddhist way of thinking. It's like that grasping is what causes suffering. We need to let go in order to relieve ourselves of suffering. The thing is, we're gonna grasp to things because we do crave things in this life and we get passionate about things. And I think having goals and an outcome to work towards can be really helpful for building momentum. In jujitsu, they say that a big differentiator between someone having a blue belt and getting their purple belt is knowing when to let go of a move that's not there anymore. And I
Mm.
think that is so hard to do, but you have something and it seems so close and you thought it was right and like you almost have it, and like should you keep working, and to know like let it go, there's something better if I let go of this. It's super scary to do, but I think there's a lot of power in that, and that just starts to give you the flexibility to ride the waves of life. And I had this come up today with two clients, two very separate, different situations, but one of them came to me wanting to lose weight by the end of July, which is this week, right? And she's lost some weight, but throughout the process, we've learned that she has rheumatoid arthritis, and um, just based on a lot that's going on with her, it seems like her breast implants are contributing to a lot that's going on with her body fighting them. So she's been going through this journey of talking to different doctors and doing tons of research about this and looking at all the different options and starting to recognize how tired she is all the time. And she told me today she was a little discouraged because she had this plan, this goal of like, I wanted to lose weight. And she said, but I know now what my body was dealing with, and being able to track all these things, I started realizing how tired I am. And then I started looking into my lab work, and then I recognized this underlying issue. And I also see where I'll be able to teach other people about this now because there's not enough information out there. And to me, that was like the most admirable thing. She had to surrender this goal that she had, which hurt, right? She wanted to know, I can achieve anything I set my mind to, but that wasn't really what God had for her in this. And sometimes we set off on a mission and we needed to, but we also need to know when to let that go and recognize that there's actually a much deeper purpose in it. And it's going to be painful, but within the pain is an opportunity to grow closer to God, an opportunity to develop our character, an opportunity to serve other people and love other people more deeply. That comes with the pain of all of that as well. You can isolate yourself on an island and go have a great time, but it gets really old because for that deep connection and love that we crave, which is actually what's going to fulfill us, it comes with a lot of pain along the way.
Totally. And while you were saying that, I just had to write down a note because I feel like, you know, what you're saying really reminded me of that book, The Obstacle is the Way, and how to really see what is happening as the universe giving you a sense of correction and like a gentle nudge back into alignment, or presenting you an opportunity to really empower yourself in the situation, like you're saying. That depth, that ability to connect, that working through hard things is literally how you stand back up from falling down. And every single time you stand back up, you start to learn your empowerment. You learn the power you hold inside of you, the spirit of God that God's gifted you. And you're able to really hold a level of confidence that isn't gifted to individuals who, or Barbie living on a world in a world of no problems. Everyone else's name is Barbie and all the boys are Ken. There's just no difference between her and another Barbie besides what they do. But they're all Barbie. And it's like, yeah, there's depth to that. She doesn't even know who she is. She's just ordinary. And like, but she's cool with that. And so it's like living in a place of just pleasure without having the disruption that really does only create more opportunity for self-discovery. You don't have a very clear idea of who you really are and what you're truly capable of. And that is just such a powerful message, I think. Like, we're not just a bunch of individuals who have the same name because we've all been through some shit. Like, we have been through shit, man. And all of us have in our own very specific ways, but all of us have stood back up in some area. And it's like we forget that. The next obstacle is just showing us that we've leveled up, like we've conquered level 1, 2, 3, and now we're on level 4, and things are going to get a lot deeper and a lot more challenging. And it's because we did the thing to stand back up. Um, and I think just on a personal note for me, something that comes up is my default subconscious programming. And it's super rooted in my athlete identity because I just held that identity for so long in my life that I still have aspects of my responses or my thought patterns or my beliefs that are rooted in when I was identifying myself as an athlete, period. And the one of the biggest lessons God's teaching me right now is that I am a very, very different person now. Very different. I'm new, but I'm also old in my God-given characteristics. Like I still have aspects of me that never change because that's like my true essence, like my true nature that separates me from everyone else. But the parts of me that I chose to identify with that weren't necessarily all of who I was or kept me very secluded in this separate box and didn't allow me to bring my whole self, it shows up for me still sometimes. And I did a breathwork journey yesterday um, that was very focused around rewiring your subconscious patterns. And I ended up having a dream last night where I was able to understand that there's just one specific thing, like some root, some like belief system of mine that I still can't 100% let go of. And it's causing me to stay in my old and not come into my new completely and identify as this self. Like, this is who I am. So, this imposter syndrome that's showing up for me is being held on to by a very specific, whether it was big T, little t trauma, or just thought of self, belief about self. Um, that, I just was able to, like, I just got it. And so it's really crazy because it is the biggest obstacle, but also exactly what God's speaking to right now. And I just feel like if we can remain open to the experiences of this life and what God has to say, then we can access a sense of truth that's going to create this empowerment within us to go to war against some of the things that are happening in our minds that aren't really us and kind of like are dropped in there by the devil to keep us stuck. But it's not fighting like fist fighting. It's like fighting like Jesus fought. Like, I'm just going to read the word. I'm going to choose peace. I'm going to get grounded. I'm going to show love and compassion. And it's like, it's not fighting like we think of fighting. It's this battle of our heart and it's the battle of our true identity of self. And I think it only comes when we can get super curious, be scientist in our nature of thought, but also just loving our whole self all the time. Like, just see every single part of yourself and love every part and find why each part serves you in a very healthy way. And then see how God's showing up in that to see if you can start to uproot some of the areas of you that serve you when they're utilized in the way that they're meant to serve you, not who you identify as, and accept that to be truth.
Definitely. It's a lot to take in, but
Thoughts,
I
yeah.
definitely
Like,
no, I feel like it all connects well, and it just sounds like you're to a point where you're not identifying with that part of you. It's like you're able to let go of the belief as something that doesn't serve you anymore. And I think that goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about, of like our identity is in something so much more than our role, our experience, our title. Like, when we can let go of that clinging to something else for stability, we can find like true peace in life and go through the seasons. And with each season, we may identify with something new. We may have a new pursuit or a new job or take on a new role of some sort. And we can ride that out as long as we need to, but then we need to know when God is calling us to level up, to we run into an obstacle and recognize, okay, now is when I need to make the next change in my life. Or, I take the other pill and I decide I'm going to stay here because I'm afraid of the change. I would rather live in this world that I've created and continue to perpetuate these thought patterns that I've used up until this point. Like, we can equally choose that. And I think that's what makes the love for God so real, is that free will that he gives us to say, like, do you want to be an active participant in your life and understand the responsibility that comes with that. And it's going to be really hard sometimes, and you're going to have to learn a lot, and you're going to figure out that you're wrong a lot. You're going to have a lot of pain. Or, do you want to just continue forward kind of blindly in the patterns that you've been doing because that feels safer? It feels more predictable. Predictable, though, is not always best for us. And I think that's on extreme levels. We see people stay in situations of like domestic violence because it's what they know, it's what's predictable to them. But I think when we start to recognize that we all do that on some level, even if it's not something that seems as extreme as that, asking ourselves, like, where am I keeping myself stuck because I'm afraid of the depth of experience, the challenge, the obstacle, the fear that might come up if I take it to the next level. And usually that's going to be our biggest opportunity for growth.
Yeah. Speaking on a very challenging topic of Barbie that I think could kind of play off of that is the patriarchy, matriarchy conversation. And I think, you know, we had a pretty in-depth conversation about that after the movie. And one of the biggest takeaways we had that I think, this is a very controversial conversation, and I feel like having like people's opinions be shared in a very calm and open way could be super powerful in this space. So just kind of like, cause I don't know, I left that movie wondering like what men thought. Like, what is a male's perspective on this movie? Like, how is this challenging maybe your beliefs and your thoughts? And I would really love to hear that because the biggest takeaway I think both of us had when we were in complete agreement was that this issue is clearly represented in our world, but for the two of us, like we both, and I'll speak for me and you can speak for you. I don't want to ever tear another person down, period. So, because the world is more naturally, obviously, there are men in positions of power, and that's something that we're working to create equality in, and that's super powerful. But at the same time, when we talk about battling and like, really fighting, it's something that for me, again, doesn't have to be if we don't make it this way, super like, well, I'm gonna put you down so I get lifted, or like I'm gonna make you feel bad because you're a male and you're not like because women aren't being respected in this area. It's like, yeah, clearly, there are areas where women are not as respected as men are. And like this is something that we are all seeing. But at the same time, how can we create equality where we just see everybody as another person and are able to respect everyone that we come into an interaction with? And where can we actually create a sense of equality where men have this natural leadership quality to them that, it's like if we call it masculinity, they have more masculinity to them, but they also have femininity to them, emotions to them. But our culture has kind of like caused us to have to silo that where women are much more feminine in their, energy, more emotional in their nature because that is kind of their superpower. Like very motherly. It's a part of being a woman, a part of being a man's being a little bit more masculine. But I truly believe that every person has both of those energies and can show up in both capacities. That if we were to just be able to understand that there are individuals who could serve in this aspect of this role really well because of their strengths, and the other could serve really well in this area and their strengths, we create this harmonious connection that could seriously, I mean, change the world. And this is the last thing I'll say about it is I think about my former boss and me. Chris at Davidson, and he and I were just so different, but also very much like healthy balances of masculine and feminine in our energy dynamic with each other. Like he has a psychology degree and he really understands emotions, and he's a man who represents like being an emotional person that's willing to share his feelings and be honest about that, but at a very healthy level. He's also very much a dominant man who has the power to lead and to instruct and to teach and educate. And I'm definitely a little more emotional than him, and he's definitely more like um, matter of fact. And so I brought a little bit of the emotions, but I also really understand matter of fact, and I really understand why that's important and where I can lead in that way as well when he can show up a little bit more emotional. So it was like this. I understood how men and women could seriously work so well together in this space that it showed me the power of having both energies, as well as in knowing, especially from my own point of view, that I naturally hold both of those energies and can utilize both of them for my strengths and have weaknesses in other areas as well.
Yeah. I think one of the most powerful things you said about this yesterday was like we identify too strongly with our sex. And it's like it's one aspect of us, just like I said, hair color is one aspect of us. And obviously, there's a lot more that goes into being of a certain sex biologically, right? There's a lot of differences in the body, externally, internally, hormonally, everything. So it isn't just that simple, but you're right. It's just one aspect of who we are, and yet in our society worldwide, it's like the number one differentiator. Like yes, racism is a massive issue. And I think we've made a lot of progress on that. And I think we have a long ways to go. But I also see where one of the first things we look at, it's like we look at skin color, we look at gender, right? And it's like that differentiates people in our minds because we associate certain characteristics, certain responsibilities, certain weaknesses, strengths with that person just based on what we're seeing, what we're categorizing them as. And it would be so amazing to be able to just see someone as they are, and that just be like another interesting fact about them without it being like the thing that's dictating how we treat them, what we expect from them, the amount of respect that we give them, the opportunities that they have in this life. And I think I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole because this one's going to get long if we go into gender and sexuality a lot. But I think it's a really interesting concept and something we could definitely dig into a little bit further if you guys are interested in that.
Definitely. I mean, I think the last thing I'll say is like we're both women. And so, you know, having, I don't know if it's just my sexuality and this is where I'll leave it, but I just haven't been treated differently for being a woman. Um, that I'm aware of. I've been treated more differently because of my sexuality than being a woman, and I don't know if that's just the culture of athletics or what it is. But it's a very real thing that this movie does a great job of portraying, I think, in a different light than what we're used to seeing. That it did, it really challenged me in thinking, as a woman, what's really, you know, what is it like for a majority of the population of women, and being able to, as myself, which might be like considered more gender neutral, if that's not that I identify that way, I identify as a woman, but just in my like masculine feminine energy, um having a very open mind to that. I think everybody coming in with an open mind to this movie could actually create some really incredible change.
Definitely. So if you guys have not seen Barbie, would highly recommend going and seeing it. Would absolutely love to know what you took away from it, maybe what you thought about how it approached certain challenging issues like this. And if you think about in your own life this week, where have I had an opportunity to take things to the next level, or just kind of like keep things where they're at because it's comfortable, red pill, blue pill? And how do you feel? It's your conscious choice. So I think it's important to understand that always. But knowing that you have a choice is important. Recognize that in those areas where you might feel stuck, there's usually an opportunity, but it usually means facing your fear. So take a look at that this week. Definitely reach out to us. You can comment below if you're watching this on YouTube. Let us know your thoughts on the Barbie movie. Thank you guys for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, and we will catch you next week on Time Under Tension.